Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear student teachers, I am Rashid Salim with lecture number 23 of Functional English 1. Lecture number 23 is really interesting because it's about writing a recipe. But first, we'll have a quick look at what we did in the earlier lecture. In lecture number 22, we learned how to identify elements of effective paragraphs. So we learned what are the important elements of effective paragraphs. We learned that a paragraph has a topic sentence, it has the supporting details, and it has a concluding sentence. Usually, a paragraph starts with a topic sentence, it has supporting details in the middle, and it ends with a concluding sentence. We also learned to analyze types and structure of various paragraphs. And we learned that paragraphs are written for various purposes, and accordingly they have different structures. There are descriptive paragraphs, there are narrative paragraphs, there are argumentative paragraphs, and there are expository paragraphs. And each kind of paragraph has a different structure. And we can organize ideas and sentences in a paragraph according to their purpose. We also learned how to write unified, cohesive, and coherent paragraphs. By unified, we mean that one paragraph or each paragraph deals with only one idea. And by cohesive and coherent paragraph, we mean that one idea naturally leads to another idea, and there are links between different sentences in a paragraph. So this is what we learned in lecture number 22. Now we move on to lecture number 23. The objectives of lecture number 23 are to use food vocabulary. We will also learn to use action verbs. We'll use the words of some and any, and a and an also. And in the end, we'll also learn how to write recipes in English. But let me start with some questions first. My first question is, what's your favorite dish? So what do you like eating? Do you like rice? And if you like rice, what kind of rice? Do you like biryani, Afghani pulao? So what's your answer? Okay, great. All right, the second question is, do you know how to cook? If yes, what can you cook well? Now, don't tell me that you can boil an egg. That's easy enough. Even I can do that. So if you can really cook something well, what is it? Great. I can hear some of you can cook really nice things. Unfortunately, I can't really taste what you cook. So I have to believe that you cook well. Okay, the next related question is, who taught you to cook? From whom did you learn it? Did you learn it from your colleagues, from your friend, from your mother, from your sister, from your wife, from your husband? Or did you learn it from none of these? You learned it from books and magazines. So who was your teacher? Okay, the next question is, have you ever tried something from the recipe books or magazines? Right, so you know, there are a lot of recipe books available in the market, and very often we have recipes given in the newspapers, in the magazines as well. So have you ever tried following a recipe or cooking something according to the recipe? Sometimes we have these recipes on the printed on the cartons, on the boxes of various cereals or other food items. So did you ever try using any of those recipes? And if you did it work? Okay, the last question is, what are the important parts of a recipe? This you must be able to answer, because you remember when we were doing process writing, when we were learning about a process involves a series of steps. And we learnt that a recipe is actually one kind of process of cooking something. But basically it has got two parts in it. Can you tell me those two parts? Yes, you are right. A recipe has got basically two parts in it: ingredients and preparation or method. So in ingredients parts, we talk about the contents or the food items that are required in order to make a particular dish. And in preparation or in method, we gave a series of steps in which we gave instructions on how to cook that thing. Okay, now let me give you an example. Here you have a sample recipe, and I'll display it in two parts. The first part is displayed right now. It is called chicken Kiev. And have you ever heard of this dish before? If you didn't, and if you like to cook, you can actually look at the recipe of this dish and you can try it at home. Great. Okay, let's look at the title first. Chicken Kiev. What is chicken Kiev? If you just look at the picture, it is chicken rolled. It's a kind of a cutlet, chicken cutlet. And you know Kiev? Ever heard of it? What is Kiev? Kiev is name of a city. It is the capital of Ukraine. That's right. It's the capital of Ukraine. So chicken Kiev is actually a dish that hails from Ukraine, although some people say that it was originally invented in Moscow, Russia. So whether it is Ukrainian or Russian is debatable, but one thing is sure, that it really tastes well. I have tried it, believe me. Okay, let's look at the ingredients first. So what things are required in order to make chicken Kiev? You need 4 whole chicken breasts. Yeah, we are going to make chicken Kiev for more than one person's. So you need 4 whole chicken breasts, ½ cup breadcrumbs. What are breadcrumbs? Pieces of bread. Okay, when you cut bread into very small pieces, they are called breadcrumbs. ½ cup grated Parmesan cheese. What is Parmesan cheese? Cheese को उर्दू में हम पनीर कहते हैं. Parmesan is one kind of cheese. It is Italian cheese, and usually it is used in spaghetti. And grated means that you have very thin slices. Grater is actually grated is actually cut in very thin slices, and we grate it with a grater, जिसको हम उर्दू में कद्दूकश करना कहते हैं गालिबन. मूली या गाजर को अक्सर जो है वो ग्रेट किया जाता है. Okay, we need 1½ teaspoons oregano leaves, and don't ask me what these oregano leaves are, because I can't really translate them. Half teaspoon crushed garlic, so it must be crushed, जिसको कुटी हुई कहते हैं, and garlic अदरक को कहते हैं. 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, 4 tablespoons of softened butter. Here I would like you to pay attention to this word softened. Okay, the T is silent. 1 tablespoon chopped parsley. Okay, chopped means cut into thin pieces. 4 ounces cheese, any sharp cheese would do, and it should be cut into strips, long strips. And how much is 1 ounce? Yes, it's something like 28 point some. I don't know the exact amount, but it is 28.4 or something of a gram is called 1 ounce. So 4 ounces of cheese is, if it is grated cheese, then probably it would be like 1 cup of cheese. But if it is cut into strips, 1 ounce is just like 1 slice of cheese, the usual size that we have. And then we have 5 ounces melted butter. Melted butter. That's right. Okay, so these are the ingredients that are required for chicken Kiev, and here we have the preparation or method. So what do? You pound chicken breasts until 1/4 inch thin. Pound means hit them hard repeatedly with a force. So you have a kind of a hammer and you pound it with a hard object for repeated times until chicken becomes 1/4 inch thin. And then mix together in a bowl breadcrumbs, grated parmesan, cheese, 1 teaspoon of oregano, crushed garlic and pepper. So mix them together in a bowl. In another small bowl, stir together 4 tablespoons of melted butter, parsley and half teaspoon of oregano. Spread melted butter mixture across the middle of each chicken breast. Lay a strip of cheese into the mixture. You remember the strip of cheese that we have? 4 ounces of cheese, any hard cheese would do. Fold the edges of the chicken breast over and roll the chicken breast. Dip each chicken breast into the melted butter. Roll each chicken breast in the breadcrumb mixture. Place chicken breasts in a 9 by 13 inch baking tray. Cover and refrigerate for at least 4 hours. And finally, bake it in the oven. Bake uncovered in a preheated 425 centigrade oven for 20 minutes. So this is how you prepare chicken Kiev. Now I hope you can try it at home, and although I would never be able to benefit from whatever you cook, but I'm sure that you would be able to cook it well. If you can recall, when we learned to describe a process, we learned that it must be in a series of steps, and these series of steps must be numbered. So here we have a numbered list, and you know each of these either start with an action verb like pound. Okay, pound is an action. Mix, spread, lay, fold, dip, roll, place, cover and bake. All these statements start, or instructions start with an action verb, except for number 3, which starts within small bowl, and then we have the action verb coming afterwards. So the verb stir is the action verb. this one, stir. So either these sentences start with the action verb, or as in case of sentence number 3, they start with the condition under which this action is performed. Okay? And these are all imperative sentences, and by imperative we mean that these sentences begin with a verb and they begin with the first form of the verb. So it's like an order, but because it is a process and imperative sentences in process, they are considered a regular norm. They are not considered impolite. And the third thing that you noticed is that we don't have lengthy details. We try to give clear and short instructions. So these instructions must be short, brief. These instructions must be, se hum आगाज करेंगे. Okay, these instructions must be short, brief, and clear. That's right. Okay, so what are the things that we should keep in mind when we are writing a process, when we are writing a recipe? We should have a numbered list, and after the numbered list we should start our sentences with an action verb, and sometimes we can start it with a condition under which these actions are performed. And lastly, we should write short, simple and clear sentences, statements, and we should use the imperative form of the verb. So we are learning how to cook chicken Kiev, and in the meantime we are also learning how to write instructions properly. Okay, but in order to write a recipe, you first need to learn the lingo. Lingo means language. So you need to learn the language which is related with food and cooking. So you need to enhance your food vocabulary, vocabulary about kitchen utensils, vocabulary about cooking verbs. In fact, what you should do is, in your notebook you should write food vocabulary, and you should classify them under vegetables, fruits, meat, dairy and spices, etc. So how many vegetables can you tell me in English? So probably you know tomato, potato, onion, garlic, carrots, cucumber, you have ladyfingers, eggplants, spinach. Can you think of any more? Yes, cauliflower, mushrooms. Okay, so these are some vegetables yet that you can think of. Think about fruits. How many fruits can you count again in English? You have lychee, you have peach, you have apricot, you have plum, mango, banana, pineapple, cherry, strawberry, etc., etc. So you have plenty of fruits. Meat, and in meat you have chicken, you have lamb, you have mutton, you have beef, and Muslims don't eat pork, but in English you would have lots of recipes that have ham or pork in it. Okay, dairy, lots of dairy products like eggs and yogurt and cheese and milk, etc., etc. Then you have the spices. Yeah, it's very difficult to remember the spices in English because usually we have their local names. Okay, I'll show you a separate slide on spices because this is something where you might need to learn the vocabulary. I'm sure that you know lots of vegetables, fruits, meat and dairy products. There shouldn't be any problem. But you might have some problem regarding the spices. So we have a separate slide. I'll go to that later. Okay, then you need to learn the names of the gadgets and the pots and pans that you use while you are cooking. These are called kitchen utensils. Okay, so you need to know how to, what are the English names of these pots and pans and spoons and knives. And nowadays there are lots of electric gadgets that are used in cooking. We need to learn that as well. Okay, then you have the cooking verbs. Basically, cooking verbs include all the action verbs that are used or that require action either before cooking or after cooking or during cooking. Okay, so you have some verbs like when you soak rice before you cook it, so there is pre-cooking vocabulary. Okay, or you cut or you grate vegetables, or you cut them, or you peel potatoes before cooking them. And there are lots of cooking verbs. You can stir the ingredients in the pan while you are cooking it. And even there are different ways of cooking. You can cook things on open fire. This is called grill. So you can grill things, you can bake things, you can boil things, you can simmer things, you can fry things, you can half fry things, you can steam roast things, you can roast things. So there are lots of different ways of cooking. Baking is inside an oven, whether it is an earthen clay oven जिसको हम उर्दू में तंदूर कहते हैं, और you have जी वापस आते हैं, और you have से दोबारा, or you have the modern electrical and modern ovens. Then you have post cooking, like presenting it, garnishing it, sprinkling sprinkle salts and pepper, etc. So before we can write, or even before we can understand a recipe, we need to improve our vocabulary. So you need to make a list of vocabulary items, and then you need to classify them into food vocabulary, kitchen utensils, and cooking verbs. And you can subclassify them into vegetables, fruits, meat, dairy, spices, and rest of the things in the same way as I've shown them on the slide. Okay, now let's learn some vocabulary and see if we can look at and if we can use these ingredients. Normally it is very difficult to explain these spices, so I want you to look at these pictures, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. I don't need to explain them. So these are cloves. You know, cloves are also important. When you have toothache, you can use them as a herb. It has medicinal value. उर्दू में इसको आप लौंग कहते हैं गालिबन. ब्लैक पेपरकॉर्न्स और ब्लैक पेपर, जिसको काली मिर्च कहते हैं, और फिलफिल सयाह भी बोलते हैं. देन यू हैव स्टार एनिस. ओके, स्टार एनिस को उर्दू में मुझे नहीं पता क्या कहते हैं, बट आई हैव सीन दिस इन बिरयानी मसाला. एंड देन यू हैव सिनेमन, जिसको दारचीनी बोलते हैं आप उर्दू में. नटमैग, इसको गालिबन जायफल बोलते हैं उर्दू में. जिंजर, अदरक को कहते हैं. सैफरॉन, ज़ाफ़रान को कहते हैं. टर्मरिक, हल्दी को कहते हैं. पेपरिका, पेपरिका ही बोलते हैं मेरा ख्याल है उर्दू में. क्यूमिन सीड्स, ज़ीरा जिसको बोलते हैं आप. कोरिएंडर सीड्स, जिसको धनिया कहते हैं, खुश्क धनिया. कार्डमम, इलायची को कहते हैं, right? Okay, so it has pod, the outer shell, and inside it, it has the seeds. Okay, well, these are some spices, and of course you can add to this list. In fact, I want you to note down these spices, and along with it you should also make a list of some other spices that you think are important. Let me tell you one thing. Sometimes some people have very good English, but they have very limited vocabulary related to food because they are not into cuisine, they don't cook very well, they are not very, eating is not their favorite hobby, so their vocabulary is limited. On the other hand, there are some people whose English might not be very well, but they have plenty of vocabulary when it comes to cooking and eating, etc. Okay, so here are the ingredients. Let's move on and look at some of the kitchen utensils. Okay, if you can see, we have a star-shaped cookie cutter in the upper left corner of the screen, just under kitchen utensils, just under the word kitchen utensils, we have a star-shaped cookie cutter. So cookie cutter is basically a pattern. So when you make dough with fine flour, and then with this you can press this star, and then you can make star-shaped cookies. These could be in different shapes. So you can have oval cookies, you can have round cookies, you can have square or rectangular cookies, or you can have any other shapes, diamond shape, whatever shape you like. Then you have the cutting board, which is used in order to cut vegetables and lots of other things. Then you have measuring cups. If you don't have the measuring cups, we normally use the teaspoon, tablespoon, etc. Then we have a pot. Okay, there are lots of pots. Sometimes they are also called the saucepans, especially if they have a lid over it. They are called the saucepan. Okay, this one is a pot. Then you have a rolling pin. Rolling pin is to roll dough in order to make bread. Then you have whisk. Whisk is to whisk eggs, to beat eggs. So this is called an egg beater, you can call it, or a whisk. Then you have the frying pan, probably very useful. Knife, cookie sheet. So cookie sheet is just like a tray in which you place the cookies. Then you have the grater. Earlier you learned what we mean by grate. Then we have a pot holder. Okay, so because pot could really be hot, so you can carry it with a pot holder. Then you have wooden spoon. This wooden spoon, if it is a big one and it is used in order to move the contents inside the pot, it is also called a ladle. Okay, after ladle we have a pie plate. If you are making an apple pie or any other kind of pie, usually use this plate. Then you have oven mitt. Oven mitt is just like a glove, and it is used in order to put or replace very hot objects inside the oven in order to protect your hands. Then we have strainers. Strainer जिसको हम छलनी कहते हैं उर्दू में. We have the serving spoon. We have measuring spoons. We have muffin tin. Muffin tin is in order to make muffins. Then you have soup ladle. Soup ladle is usually much deeper. Then you have various kinds and shapes of bowls. You have casserole dish with the lid, usually a glass lid. Then you have spatula. Spatula is of various kinds. You have an apron. You have roasting pan. You have can opener. You have ice cube tray, potato masher, peeler, etc. So these are just some of the kitchen utensils that we have looked at. Other than these, you also have pepper shakers or salt sprinklers. Okay, and you can have lots of other electric gadgets as well, like you have grinder, you have shaker, or you have mixer, you have mincer in order to mince meat, जिसको कीमा करने वाली मशीन आप बोलते हैं. So there are some kitchen utensils that you should be aware of. Let's move on and have a look at some of the cooking verbs. Okay, we have already learned what we mean by grate. So what are the things that we normally grate? Apart from cheese, what else do we grate? Yes, you're right. We grate radishes. Radish मूली को कहते हैं. We grate turnips. We grate carrots. We grate cheese. And we can grate lots of other things. Okay. Then we have grill. Grill, I told you earlier that this is one way of cooking. Then you have layer. There are lots of things that when you cook, you make different layers of things. Level. Okay. For leveling, you usually use something like a leveler in order to make it level. Then you have melt. Then you have a cooking verb melt. Okay, जिसको पिघलाना कहते हैं उर्दू में. Pinch of salt or something like this. Then you have pour water. Scramble, फेंटने को कहते हैं, scramble. Serve, पेश करने को कहते हैं. Simmer. Okay, I've talked about simmer earlier. Simmer is like boil, but boil is on high flame and simmer is on low flame. So when you boil something for a long period of time on a low flame, it is called simmer. जो शांदा वगैरह जैसे बनाते हैं. Or when you make soup, usually you simmer it for a long period of time. Then slice means to cut something in slices. Spread, like you spread butter. Stir is like move. Then of course taste. I don't need to explain it. So here are some cooking verbs, and along with this you have lots of other cooking verbs. So you should look for them on your own. But I want to go forward, and here we have one task. I downloaded this task from bbc.co.uk. It's they have a page called Scalewise, and in Scalewise you can actually have plenty of things for learning English. So this is a good resource. Okay, here are the instructions. Here is a set of instructions for making a pudding. Each step has several options. Choose the best option from each step and write out the recipe. So this recipe is already given. They haven't given the ingredients, but the second section of the recipe or the method is given here. What we need to do is that we need to find out the instruction which is the best one. So here, for example, you have step 1, it is written 3 times. And we have to choose which one of these 3 statements or instructions is effective or is a good one. So which one do you think is good here? I read them out for you. Crush 2 packets of ginger biscuits with a rolling pin and put them in a bowl. Or the first step is to put 2 packets of ginger biscuits into a bowl and then to crush them using a rolling pin. Or a rolling pin should be used to crush the ginger biscuits in a bowl. So what do you say? Okay, great. The first one, crush 2 packets of ginger biscuits with a rolling pin and put them in a bowl is the best option because this instruction starts with an action verb. Second thing is that it is redundant to say the first step is. When number 1 is written, you don't need to say the first step is. So the second option is not valid. The third option is not valid because we shouldn't use moral verbs and we shouldn't use any difficult or complex language structures. Instead, we should use imperative forms of verbs, and we should start with an action verb. Or if there are any conditions for those action verbs, we can start with them as well. Okay, let's look at number 2. Following that, the biscuits should be mixed with some orange juice so that the mixture is sticky. Then pour in some orange juice, enough to make the mixture sticky, and stir. Orange juice must be added to the biscuits so that they form a sticky mixture. So which one of the options is right this time? Yes, the second one, because it is short, okay, and because it has the condition like then, and it starts with the action verb pour. Okay, great. Let's move on. Okay, step number 3. The next step is to place a layer of the biscuit mixture at the bottom of a glass bowl. The bottom of a glass bowl should be covered with a layer of the biscuit mixture. Next, put a layer of the biscuit mixture into a glass bowl. That's right. You are right. The last one is the shortest, the clearest, and it uses the cohesive device then and next also. So this is the best option. Okay, step number 4. Then cover the mixture with a layer of setsuma. Setsumas should be placed in a layer over the biscuit mixture. Following that, the biscuit mixture should be covered with a layer of oranges. Okay, so you got it probably from the last sentence that setsuma is one kind of orange. It is a citrus fruit, and Satsuma is actually, if I am not mistaken, it's name of a city in Japan, because this kind of orange or citrus, or you can call it a mandarin, it comes from a city in Japan, so that's why it is called Satsuma. Anyway, let's move on and find out which one is the right option here. Great. The first one is the right option, again because we have the cohesive device then, and this is the shortest and clearest, and it has the action verb cover. Okay, number 5. On top of that, put a layer of whipping cream. Put a layer of whipping cream on top of the setsumas. A layer of whipping cream should then be placed on top of the setsumas. That's right. If you said number 2, you are right. The middle option, the second option, put a layer of whipping cream on top of the setsumas is the better choice. The reason is that it is shorter, it is clearer, and on top of that is actually really very confusing because you don't know what the word that refers to. But if you use the word setsuma again, then it becomes clearer. Okay, we'll move on. 2 more steps left. Then you need to cover with a layer of biscuits, a layer of setsumas, a layer of cream, and so on until all of the ingredients are used up. Or repeat the layers until you have used up all of the ingredients. Or make sure you use up all of the ingredients by repeating the layers. Now this time the first option is the better choice because although it is longer than the rest, but it is clearer because you know that you are going to make a layer of biscuit first, and then you are going to make a layer of setsumas, then a layer of cream, and so on. If you simply use the word repeat, you don't know which order to make these layers. Okay, the last step is the final layer of cream must be decorated with a further layer of satsumas, or a decorative layer of satsumas should be placed on top of the final layer of the cream, or finish with a layer of cream and decorate with more satsuma. You're right. The last one, finish with a layer of cream and decorate with more satsuma, is the best option. So we learnt that when we are writing the second section of a recipe that gives a method, we should, first of all, we should make a numbered list of instructions. These instructions should be clear and they should be short. They should be brief and clear. And these instructions should either start with an action verb or they should start with a cohesive device like then, next, after that, finish. So these words actually help the readers to order them properly. Okay, great. You have done this task really very well. So let's move on. Now we are going to look at a sample recipe. Actually, it's the same recipe that we have just learnt. Once you have found out the best sentences of best instructions, if you put them all together, the 7 steps on one page, this is how the recipe would look. Okay. Well, in the handout section, I have also provided with a sample recipe. I'm sorry, I haven't provided you with the sample recipe of this pudding, but I have provided you with chicken Kiev. If you like that, you can try it at home. Okay, now we move on, and now we are going to look at the use, we are going to look at some grammar, some and any. Before we know which words take some and which words take any and which words take a or an, we need to know there are 2 kinds of nouns. A noun can be either uncountable or it could be countable. Okay? Usually the food items, they are either uncountable or they are countable. If they are uncountable, this means we cannot say 1, 2, 3 with them. We can't count them with these numbers. We can't say 1 cheese, 2 cheese, 3 cheese, 4 cheese. Instead, we will use a measuring unit with it. So we'll say 1 slice of cheese, we'll say 1 packet of cheese, etc., etc. Okay? Whereas if we can count like 1 apple, 2 apple, 3 apples, then it will be a countable noun. Okay, so an apple is countable, whereas cheese is uncountable in English. And remember, a countable noun is a noun that can be counted. That means we can use 1, 2, 3 with it in English. Sometimes you see a noun which is countable in Urdu might not be necessarily countable in English. For example, in Urdu we can count chapatis. We can say एक चपाती, 2 चपातियाँ, 1 रोटी, 2 रोटियाँ, 3 रोटियाँ. But in English we can't say 1 bread, 2 breads, 3 breads. That will be unnatural English. Instead we would say 1 piece of bread, 1 slice of bread, or 1 loaf of bread if it is the whole bread. Then we'll call it 1 loaf of bread. So in other words, we will need a measuring unit with it. We can count the measuring unit, but we can't count the object itself. So are many other food items that are uncountable. Okay, so once you have learned what food items are uncountable and what food items are countable, we come to the next step. We use a or an with a singular countable noun. I repeat, we use a or an with a singular countable noun. For example, apple is countable, and when it is singular we can say an apple. There is an apple in the refrigerator. There is an apple in the fridge. Okay, because it is singular, it is countable, we can use a or an with it. We can say there are some bananas in the fridge. So some is for plural and an is for singular. But an is only for singular countable nouns. We can't say there is a cheese or there is a milk because an cannot come before uncountable nouns in English. So the rule is that we use a or an before singular countable nouns, and we use some before countable or uncountable nouns when they are plural. So we can use some cheese, we can say some bananas, we can say some apples, we can say some milk. So some can be used either before uncountable or before countable noun when it is plural. Okay, how about any? Word any comes either when we are using a negative sentence, like there isn't any juice in the fridge. So we won't say there isn't some juice, because we are making a negative sentence. So we'll say there isn't any juice. There aren't any pears in the fridge. Okay. Similarly, we use any when we are asking a question, like, is there any milk in the fridge? No, there isn't any milk in. No, there is actually. There is some milk in the fridge. Are there any tomatoes in the fridge? No, there aren't any tomatoes. No. There are some tomatoes in the fridge. Okay, are there any pomegranates? Are there any pomegranates in the fridge? No, there aren't any pomegranates in the fridge. Is there any yogurt in the fridge? No, there isn't any yogurt. Okay, then we can also use the word how much and how many. How much is used for uncountable nouns, and how many is used for countable nouns, because how many asks about number and how much asks about quantity. So uncountable nouns, uncountable food items have the quantity, whereas countable food items have number. How many eggs are there in the fridge? You are right, there are 4 eggs in the fridge. Okay, great. So now you have learned that you use a or an with singular countable nouns in English, and you use some with countable or uncountable nouns when they are, especially food items, whether they are countable or uncountable, you use the word some with them. And we use any with negative sentences or with questions. Okay, now earlier we learned that with uncountable nouns we need to use certain measuring words. Now there could be standard measuring units, like we have kilogram, we have liters. These are the standard measuring units. But in routine life, usually we don't use the standard measuring units. Sometimes we do, but normally we don't. Mostly we use measuring words that are not really standard. Okay, so here we are going to look at these items, and we'll see what measuring units do we use with them. So what about bread? Okay, I start with the bread. What about bread? That's right. We say a loaf of bread. If it is a complete loaf, a loaf. So when we actually go to the market and buy a bread, we buy a complete loaf of bread. And then we cut it into slices or cut it into pieces. So you can have a piece of bread, you can have slice of bread, or you can have a loaf of bread. and when you know have very small pieces, they are called the breadcrumbs, as we learned earlier. Okay, you have a bunch of grapes. गुच्छे को कहते हैं, a bunch of grapes. So you can't say 1 grape, 2 grapes, 3 grapes. Instead, you will say a bunch of grapes. A cup of coffee. Okay, so a cup is the measuring unit here. A bowl of rice. Of course, you can also say a kilo of rice, half kilo of rice, but you can also say a plate of rice, a bowl of rice, etc. A loaf of bread, we've done that already. Number 5, lumps of sugar. Right? Lumps of sugar means ये वाला जो last है ये है, ये वाला. Lumps of sugar, sugar cubes भी होती हैं, a cube of sugar, but this one is a lump. एक ढेला सा हो जो उसको lump कहते हैं, a lump of sugar. So you can also say spoon of sugar, pinch of sugar, etc., etc. Okay, for chocolate you can say a bar of chocolate, a bottle of mineral water, a box of chocolates. You can have a bar of chocolate and you can also have a box of chocolate. Like here you have a Valentine box, a box of chocolate, and this one is a bar of chocolate. A can of Coke, this one. A tin of tuna, this one. Tuna is a fish, and this is tin pack fish. A packet of crisps, this one here. A bag of flour, just a second, a bag of flour. There could be different kinds of flours, fine flour. Okay, then you have a slice of pizza. It's pronounced as pizza. 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 Not pizza, right? Pizza. So you have a slice of pizza, and then you have a glass of juice. Okay? So next time when you listen to these items, you should actually make a note of what measuring units are used along with them. And this will make your English very natural. Okay, so we have learned the vocabulary which is required in order to write a recipe, and we've also learned the process of writing a recipe. We've also looked at a sample recipe and we analyzed it, and we actually looked at the sentence that is the most appropriate in order to give instructions. Now here is the practice situation. You are going to write a detailed recipe of your own favorite dish, and here you can think of your answer to the question that I asked earlier. You remember earlier I asked you a few questions, and one of those questions was, what is your favorite dish? So if you said biryani is your favorite dish, then you are going to write a detailed recipe of your favorite dish. Don't start writing a recipe for something that is very easy, or such as boiling an egg or frying an egg, or etc. I want you to think of something that is really not easy to make. So even if you can't really cook it, I'm not really interested in that. If you can write a wonderful, very good recipe on a piece of paper, I'll be glad. If you think that you don't know how to cook something, you can seek advice from someone. You can ask your wife, you can ask your mother, you can ask your colleagues or anyone who can cook it. For example, halim, nihari, palau, curry. These are few dishes that are not easy to make, and they have complex recipes, I'm sure. So you can think of those. But you need to keep few points in mind. Number one, you should not copy your recipe from any recipe book or magazine or newspaper, because it will mar the whole purpose. The whole purpose is that you practice writing a recipe, and by doing so you will be learning how to write for process. This is called process writing. So you will also learn how to write proper instructions, and that will help you in teaching as well. Okay, so you shouldn't copy it from any recipe book. If you are not sure about the ingredients, you can look them up in a dictionary and you can use them surely, but I don't want you to copy a recipe word for word. Okay. Similarly, I've already mentioned that you shouldn't think of something which is really simple or easy to make. Instead, you should think of something which is challenging, which is difficult to make. And if you keep in mind that you are going to write the recipe of your favorite dish, then probably your favorite dish is not a boiled egg. I'm sure it must be something which is much more complicated, a lot more tastier than a boiled egg. Although some of you might be saying that it is not easy to boil an egg. I know you need to be skilled in order to soft boil, half boil, hard boil an egg, and it's not easy. It's not easy to peel off the skin of an egg, of boiled egg, especially if you don't pour salt in water while it is boiling. I know these kind of things, but it is still simple, because when you write a recipe, it doesn't involve many steps. So when I'm saying don't look for anything simple, I'm not saying in terms of cooking it, I'm saying in terms of writing a recipe for it. So it shouldn't be simple. I'm hopeful that you will find a favorite dish, and then you will, if you don't know how to cook it, you will ask someone, and then accordingly you will write it in detail. And I would appreciate if you can share it with the rest of the people so that they can also follow it. Okay, very well. With this, we come to the end of today's lecture, and we will just look at the summary of what we learned today, and then I'll say goodbye. In lecture number 23, you learned how to use food vocabulary. And food vocabulary includes all sorts of vegetables, fruits, spices in particular, ingredients. It could be any ingredients actually, but it could also include meat or dairy products, etc., etc. Food vocabulary also involves cooking verbs. It also involves kitchen utensils that we use, the electronic gadgets. Then we learned how to use action verbs. Okay, and again we need to learn action verbs for pre-cooking, post-cooking, and cooking process. And there are lots of things like moving, cutting, soaking, right? Garnishing, sprinkling, that are not really cooking verbs, but these are verbs that are action verbs, and they are used either before cooking or after cooking or during cooking. They are part of the cooking process. We also learned how to use some, any, a, and an. So you need to differentiate between countable and uncountable food items, and then accordingly you should use some or any or a or an with it. And finally you learned how to write a recipe. We learned that a recipe has basically two parts in it. It has ingredients, and it also has the method or preparation. Your method should always be written in a series of steps. These steps should be numbered steps, and you should use action words in it, and you should use imperative sentences for instructions, and your instructions should be short and clear and simple. And you should also use some cohesive devices in order to give an idea of the order of carrying out these instructions. And these cohesive devices could be like first, second, then after that, finally, etc., etc. So I hope that you have learned quite a lot today. Not only you learned how to cook chicken Kiev and how to cook pudding, and along with it you also learned some food vocabulary, and you learned some and any, a and an. You learned countable, uncountable nouns. You also learned how to write recipes. So this was a really interesting lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. You can try out these recipes if you want to, but if you don't, I won't be unhappy. But I'll be unhappy if you don't practice the language that comes along with these recipes. With this, I say goodbye. Thank you very much.